The first crack appeared on a Tuesday night in late March, so subtle that most wives would have missed it entirely. Dr. Vivian Hart, 40 years old, and a literature professor specializing in Shakespearean tragedy, did not miss it. She had spent 15 years teaching her students about dramatic irony, about the moment when the audience knows something the characters do not, about the terrible beauty of watching tragedy unfold in slow motion. She never imagined she would become both audience and protagonist in her own domestic drama. Trevor had returned from the legal conference in Chicago 3 days earlier, on Saturday afternoon. He had kissed her at the door, the same quick peck on the cheek he always gave after business trips, his leather briefcase heavy in his left hand. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming. But that Tuesday night, while Vivian sat at the kitchen table grading student essays on Othello, she noticed Trevor's phone light up on the counter. He was upstairs taking a shower, and the phone sat there glowing with a text notification. She did not reach for it. She did not need to. What caught her attention was not the message itself, but Trevor's reaction when he came downstairs 12 minutes later, hair still damp, wearing the navy pajama pants she had bought him for Christmas. He grabbed the phone with a speed that seemed almost violent, his whole body tensing as he swiped it up. His thumb moved across the screen with practiced efficiency, entering a passcode she did not recognize. They had always kept their phones unlocked at home, a small gesture of trust built over 10 years of marriage. When had that changed? She watched him from behind her reading glasses, her red pen hovering over a particularly insightful paragraph about Iago's manipulation tactics. Trevor's face, illuminated by the blue glow of his screen, transformed. His jaw softened. The corner of his mouth lifted in a smile she had not seen directed at her in months. Then, just as quickly, he locked the screen, placed the phone face down on the counter, and asked if she wanted tea. Vivian said yes. She always said yes to tea. It was their small evening ritual, the quiet domesticity that made a marriage feel like home. But as Trevor filled the kettle and pulled 2 mugs from the cabinet, she found herself studying him with the same analytical attention she brought to a complex text. The way he kept glancing at the phone, the way his shoulders remained tense even as he went through the familiar motions of steeping Earl Grey, the way he did not meet her eyes when he set her mug down on the table, the steam curling between them like a question mark. She did not ask, not that night. Instead, she returned to her essays, circling a particularly brilliant observation about how Othello's tragedy stems from his inability to see what is plainly visible. The irony was not lost on her. Over the next week, Vivian began to notice other shifts, small earthquakes in the foundation of their life together. Trevor, who had always been somewhat careless about his appearance, wearing the same rotation of work suits until she forced him to buy new ones, suddenly developed an interest in his wardrobe. On Thursday morning, she watched him pull out a shirt she had never seen before, a fitted pale blue Oxford that made his shoulders look broader, his waist trimmer. The fabric looked expensive, the kind with mother-of-pearl buttons and careful stitching along the seams. When she commented on it, telling him it looked nice, he said he had bought it months ago but forgotten about it. His tone was casual, almost dismissive, but his eyes did not quite meet hers when he said it. He adjusted his collar 3 times in the mirror before leaving for work. Friday evening, she came home from her 4 o'clock seminar on Renaissance drama to find Trevor in the bathroom, leaning close to the mirror with a small pair of scissors, carefully trimming the hair above his ears. He had never done this before. He always waited until his monthly haircut appointment at the barber shop downtown, often going weeks looking slightly shaggy, because he claimed he was too busy to schedule it. She would nag him gently, reminding him that he had a court appearance coming up, and he would laugh and say nobody looked at lawyers' hair anyway. Now here he was, voluntarily grooming himself, humming softly under his breath. Some tune she did not recognize, melodic and light. She stood in the doorway watching him for almost a full minute before he noticed her reflection in the mirror. He startled, just slightly, the scissors pausing mid-snip, then smiled, and said he had decided to take better care of himself. He was 43, after all. Time to stop letting himself go. Vivian nodded and said that was a good idea, that he had always been handsome, but a little extra effort never hurt. She kept her voice light, supportive, even as something cold settled in her stomach. She did not mention that he had never let himself go, that she had always found him attractive exactly as he was, slightly rumpled and professorial in his own way. She did not ask why this sudden concern with appearance coincided so precisely with his return from Chicago. She simply filed the observation away, another piece of evidence in a case she was not yet ready to acknowledge she was building. The phone became his constant companion in ways that felt almost possessive. Trevor had always been attached to his device, as most corporate lawyers were, tethered to clients and partners, and the endless demands of billable hours. But this was different. He carried it everywhere now, clutched in his hand or tucked into his pocket, even during moments when he used to leave it charging on the kitchen counter. She noticed it on Saturday morning when he excused himself during breakfast, taking the phone with him for what turned into a 45-minute absence. When he returned, his hair was wet. He had showered. In the middle of the morning, after already showering when he first woke up, without explanation. She was sitting at the table with her second cup of coffee, the newspaper spread before her, and she looked up at him with a question in her eyes. He said he had gone for a run and needed to clean up, but he was not wearing running clothes. He was wearing the jeans and gray sweater he had put on after his first shower. Sunday, they drove to the farmer's market, something they had done almost every weekend for the past 5 years. It was one of Vivian's favorite rituals, wandering through the stalls of organic vegetables and artisan cheeses, the air smelling of fresh bread and cut flowers, Trevor carrying the canvas bags while she selected produce and chatted with the vendors she had come to know by name. But that Sunday, Trevor kept checking his phone. Every few minutes, he would pull it from his pocket, glance at the screen with an expression of barely concealed eagerness, and type a quick message, his thumbs moving rapidly across the keyboard. When Vivian asked if everything was all right at work, if there was some emergency that needed his attention, he said yes, just some client issues that could not wait. But it was Sunday. And Trevor's firm, while demanding, did not typically handle the kind of cases that required constant weekend communication. Most of their clients were corporations dealing with mergers and contracts, not criminal defendants or crisis situations. At the cheese stall, while Vivian was discussing the merits of aged Gouda versus sharp cheddar with the vendor, a woman in her 60s who always remembered that Vivian preferred the stronger varieties, she glanced back to see Trevor standing several feet away near a display of spring flowers. His phone was pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing animatedly as he spoke. She could not hear his words over the bustle of the market, but she could see his face. He was smiling, not the polite professional smile he used with difficult clients or opposing counsel, but something warmer, more genuine, the kind of smile that crinkles the eyes and softens the whole face. The smile he used to give her when they were dating, when he would call her between classes just to hear her voice. When he noticed her watching, he ended the call abruptly, almost guiltily, walked back to her side, and said it was just someone from the office calling about a brief that needed filing on Monday. She did not ask who. She already knew, with a certainty that made her hands tremble slightly as she paid for the cheese, that he would lie. That night, Vivian lay awake in their bed, listening to Trevor breathe beside her. He had fallen asleep with unusual speed, his body turned away from hers, exhausted from what he claimed was a long week of challenging depositions and client meetings. But Vivian's mind raced, connecting dots she did not want to connect, seeing patterns she did not want to see. She thought about Othello, about how Shakespeare's greatest tragedy unfolds not through grand deceptions, but through small, accumulated details. A handkerchief, a misinterpreted conversation, a well-meaning friend with poisonous suggestions. The terrible power of doubt once it takes root in fertile soil. She rolled onto her side and studied her husband's sleeping face in the darkness, the streetlight from outside casting pale shadows across his features. After 10 years of marriage, she knew every line, every angle. The small scar on his left eyebrow from a childhood bike accident he had told her about on their third date. The way his jaw clenched slightly, even in sleep, when he was stressed about a case. Grinding his teeth until she gently reminded him to wear his night guard. The tiny mole just below his right ear that she used to kiss. But looking at him now, she felt like she was seeing a stranger. Someone wearing her husband's face, but inhabited by different thoughts, different desires, different loyalties. Monday morning arrived with rain, the kind of steady April shower that makes everything feel gray and uncertain, washing the world in shades of slate and steel. Trevor left for work at 7:30, as always, his umbrella tucked under his arm, his leather briefcase in hand. He kissed the top of her head as she sat at the kitchen table with her coffee and her lecture notes for the day. She had 3 classes scheduled, all focused on betrayal in Renaissance drama, a thematic unit she had been teaching for years. The lesson plans had been prepared weeks ago, printed and highlighted and annotated with her careful handwriting. But now they felt almost prophetic, as if the universe was forcing her to confront in literature what she was beginning to suspect in life. She would spend the day discussing how Hamlet discovers his uncle's treachery, how King Lear misreads his daughter's intentions, how truth emerges slowly and painfully through careful observation and bitter experience. Her first class, Introduction to Shakespeare, began at 9 in the morning. 22 undergraduate students, most of them still shaking off sleep, faces illuminated by the glow of laptop screens, slumped in their chairs in the tiered lecture hall while Vivian stood at the front and talked about Act 3 of Hamlet. She found herself dwelling on the scene where Hamlet confronts his mother, the moment when he forces Gertrude to see what she has been willfully ignoring, to acknowledge the truth she has been burying beneath layers of convenient denial. "Look here upon this picture, and on this," Hamlet commands, making his mother compare the portrait of his dead father with the living presence of his uncle, between genuine love and counterfeit affection, between what was and what is. A student in the third row, a young woman with bright purple hair and multiple ear piercings, raised her hand tentatively and asked why Gertrude did not see it earlier. Why did she need Hamlet to point it out? Why was she so blind? The question hung in the air, and Vivian paused, chalk hovering over the blackboard, where she had been mapping out the play's structure, drawing arrows between scenes, connecting themes of sight and blindness, knowledge and ignorance. "It is difficult," she said slowly, choosing her words with care, "to see what would break your heart to acknowledge. Sometimes we choose blindness, because sight is too painful. We protect ourselves from truths that would shatter the reality we have built." Gertrude loved the idea of her life, her position as queen, her new husband who made her feel desired again. To see the truth would mean losing all of that, so she chose not to see. The student nodded, satisfied with the answer, scribbling notes in her laptop. But Vivian stood there for a moment longer, staring at the diagram on the board, feeling the weight of her own words settle into her chest, like stones sinking to the bottom of a dark lake. Around her, students shifted in their seats, coughed, whispered to each other, waiting for her to continue. She blinked, pulled herself back to the present, and resumed the lecture. But part of her mind remained elsewhere, wondering if she was Gertrude, willfully blind, or Hamlet, forced to see what she wished she could ignore. That evening, she came home to an empty house. Trevor had texted her at 3 in the afternoon, a brief message saying he had a late meeting with a client and would not be home until after 8. She stood in the kitchen, still wearing her coat, staring at those words on her phone screen. Late meeting. How many times had she heard that phrase over the past 2 weeks? 5 times? 6? She tried to remember if this frequency was normal, if Trevor had always worked late this often and she simply had not paid attention. But she knew the answer. This was new. Everything was new. She made herself dinner, a simple salad with grilled chicken, and ate alone at the table where they usually sat together. The silence of the house pressed against her, heavy and suffocating. She tried to grade papers, but the words blurred on the page. She tried to read a novel, but could not focus. Finally, she pulled out her laptop and opened their shared banking account, something she managed because Trevor claimed he was too busy to track household expenses. She scrolled through recent transactions, not quite sure what she was looking for, feeling guilty for even looking, as if suspicion itself was a betrayal of trust. Then she saw it. $412 at a men's clothing boutique downtown, charged 5 days ago, on Wednesday afternoon. Trevor never shopped at boutiques. He bought his suits at the same department store he had been using since law school. Practical and efficient. She clicked on the transaction details, but they offered no additional information. Just the store name, the amount, the date. $400 on clothes. She thought of the pale blue shirt, the one he claimed he had bought months ago. She thought of how he had started dressing differently, more carefully, more intentionally. She closed the laptop and sat in the darkness, her dinner half-eaten, her heart beating too fast in her chest. Outside, rain continued to fall, steady and relentless, washing against the windows like tears. Trevor arrived home at 9:27 that night, more than an hour later than he had promised. Vivian heard the garage door open, then the sound of his car pulling in, the engine shutting off, the car door closing with a muffled thump. She remained at the kitchen table, her laptop closed now, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had gone cold an hour ago. She listened to his footsteps in the hallway, the rustle of his coat being hung in the closet, the soft thud of his briefcase hitting the floor. When he appeared in the doorway, she looked up and studied his face with the careful attention she gave to a complex poem, searching for meaning in every detail. He looked tired, but not in the way someone looks after a long day of difficult negotiations or tedious contract reviews. His tiredness seemed lighter somehow, as if exhaustion had been mixed with something else, something that made his eyes brighter despite the late hour. His tie was loosened, hanging askew around his neck. His hair, which he had trimmed so carefully just days ago, looked slightly disheveled, as if he had run his hands through it repeatedly. And there was something else, something that made Vivian's stomach clench with a sick feeling she could not quite name. His shirt collar was slightly wrinkled, and there was a small mark on his neck just above the collar line, a faint discoloration that could have been anything, a scratch, a bruise, or something else entirely. He smiled at her, that automatic smile spouses give each other after a long day, and asked if she had eaten. She said yes, gestured to the leftover salad in the refrigerator, told him he could help himself. He thanked her, said he had grabbed something at the office, some sandwiches they had ordered in during the meeting. He poured himself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, loosening his tie further, and began talking about his day. A difficult client, he said. A woman who was trying to dissolve a business partnership and kept changing her mind about what she wanted. The meeting had run long because they had to go through every clause of the partnership agreement, line by line, explaining the implications of each decision. Vivian nodded, made appropriate sounds of sympathy and understanding, and watched him perform this recitation of his day. Because that was what it was, she realized, a performance. The details were too smooth, too practiced, as if he had rehearsed them in the car on the way home. And he was not meeting her eyes. Not really. He was looking at her face, but his gaze kept sliding away, focusing on points just past her shoulder, on the wall behind her, on his own hands as they gripped the water glass. When he finished his story, he asked about her day, and she told him about her classes, about the student who had asked why Gertrude could not see the truth. She watched his face as she spoke, searching for any flicker of recognition, any sign that the irony of the conversation resonated with him. But he simply nodded absently and said that sounded interesting, that her students always asked good questions. Then he said he was exhausted and was going to take a shower before bed. It was 9:45 at night, and he was taking his second shower of the day, his third if she counted the mysterious mid-morning shower on Saturday. She heard the water running upstairs, the familiar sounds of the pipes groaning slightly as they always did. She sat at the table and tried to calm the racing of her thoughts, tried to find rational explanations for everything she was observing. Maybe he was just stressed at work. Maybe he was going through some kind of early midlife crisis, becoming more concerned with his appearance and his health. Maybe the late meetings really were just late meetings, and she was seeing patterns where none existed, projecting her own insecurities onto innocent circumstances. But then she remembered the mark on his neck, and the way he had touched it unconsciously while talking to her, his fingers brushing over it as if checking to make sure it was covered. And she knew, with a certainty that made her feel simultaneously sick and strangely calm, that she was not imagining anything. The shower ran for 38 minutes. She timed it without quite meaning to, glancing at the clock on the microwave when the water started, then looking again when it finally stopped. 38 minutes. What did someone do in the shower for 38 minutes? She thought of all the showers she had taken in her life, the quick morning rinses before work, the longer evening showers when she was trying to relax after a difficult day. Even her longest showers never exceeded 15 or 20 minutes. What was he doing up there? When he finally came downstairs, his hair was still damp, darkened from blonde to brown by the water. He was wearing different pajamas than usual, a new set she had not seen before, charcoal gray with thin white pinstripes. They fit him well, tailored and expensive-looking. He noticed her looking and said he had bought them last week, thought it was time to update his sleepwear. She said nothing, just nodded, and he kissed the top of her head before heading to the bedroom. She stayed downstairs for another hour, pretending to work on her laptop, actually just staring at the screen while her mind spun in circles. The pattern continued over the following days, each small detail adding to the weight of evidence she was accumulating. Wednesday morning, she found a receipt in the pocket of Trevor's suit jacket when she was taking his clothes to the dry cleaner, something she did every other week as part of their domestic routine. The receipt was from a restaurant she had never heard of, an Italian place on the other side of the city, dated from the previous Friday. The total was $283. For one person, that would have been an extravagant meal. For two people, it was intimate and expensive, the kind of dinner you had when you were trying to impress someone or celebrate something special. She stood in their bedroom, holding the small slip of paper, and tried to remember what Trevor had told her about the previous Friday. He had said he was working late on a brief that needed to be filed on Monday. He had texted her at 7 to say he was grabbing a quick bite at his desk and would be home by 10. She looked at the timestamp on the receipt, 7:32 in the evening. While he was supposedly working at his desk, he had been at an expensive Italian restaurant across town. She carefully placed the receipt back in the jacket pocket and took the clothes to the cleaner as planned. She did not confront him. Not yet. She was building something, though she was not quite sure what. A case, a narrative, an understanding. She needed more information before she could act, needed to be absolutely certain she was not misreading the situation, even though every instinct told her she was reading it exactly right. Thursday afternoon, between her 2 o'clock class on Jacobean tragedy and her 3:30 office hours, she sat in her university office and did something she had never imagined herself doing. She created a simple spreadsheet on her laptop, a document titled, with the innocuous name, Spring Semester Planning. But the columns were not for lesson plans or grading schedules. They were for dates, times, claimed activities, and observations. She started filling it in, going back through her phone calendar and text messages, reconstructing the past 3 weeks since Trevor's return from Chicago. March 15th, Saturday. Trevor returns from conference. Seems normal, but tired. March 19th, Wednesday. First late meeting, claims client emergency. Home at 8:45. March 21st, Friday. Restaurant receipt, $283, Italian place across town. Claimed working at desk. March 23rd, Sunday. Farmer's market, multiple phone calls, unusual behavior. March 25th, Tuesday. Late meeting, home at 9:15. Shower lasted 40 minutes. The pattern emerged clearly once she laid it out visually. 3 to 4 late meetings per week, always on weekdays, never on weekends when she might ask to join him or suggest they make evening plans. Increased attention to appearance starting exactly 1 day after his return from Chicago. New passwords on his phone. Constant protection of his device, taking it everywhere, even to the bathroom. The spreadsheet grew longer as she added more details, more observations, each one small and possibly innocent on its own, but devastating when assembled together. She saved the document and closed her laptop just as a student knocked on her office door for help with an essay on King Lear. She spent 30 minutes discussing how Shakespeare uses the subplot of Gloucester and his sons to mirror Lear's own story of betrayal and blindness, how the entire play is about the pain of seeing clearly what you wish you could ignore. The student thanked her enthusiastically, said she was the best professor he had ever had, so insightful and understanding. She smiled and said she was glad she could help, and after he left, she sat alone in her office and laughed quietly, bitterly, at the irony of being praised for understanding literary blindness while living through her own version of it. Friday evening brought the confirmation she had been both dreading and expecting. Trevor came home at his usual time, 6:30, and told her he needed to go back to the office around 8 for a few hours. A partner meeting, he said. Some strategic planning for the upcoming quarter that could not wait until Monday. She asked if he needed to bring anything, if she should pack him some coffee or snacks. He said no. They were ordering in. Everything was taken care of. He changed out of his work clothes into casual attire, dark jeans, and a fitted black sweater she did not remember buying him. He spent 15 minutes in the bathroom, and when he emerged, she could smell cologne. Not his usual scent, the woody cedar fragrance she had given him for their anniversary. This was different, lighter, more citrus-forward, more youthful. She asked if he was wearing new cologne. He paused, just for a fraction of a second, then said yes. He had picked some up at the department store last week, wanted to try something different. She said it smelled nice. He thanked her, kissed her cheek, and left. She listened to his car pull out of the driveway, waited until the sound of the engine faded completely, and then she sat on the couch and cried for the first time since this nightmare had begun. Not loud, wrenching sobs, but quiet tears that slid down her face while she stared at the television without seeing it. She let herself feel the hurt for exactly 10 minutes, timed on her phone, and then she wiped her face, took several deep breaths, and made a decision. She would not be Gertrude, willfully blind. She would not be Othello, driven to madness by uncertainty. She would be Hamlet, methodical and strategic, gathering evidence and waiting for the right moment to act. She would watch and document and understand exactly what was happening before she made any moves. Because if she was going to confront this, if she was going to blow up her marriage of 10 years, she needed to be absolutely certain, and she needed to have all the information, all the power, all the control. She pulled out her laptop and added to her spreadsheet. April 4th, Friday, 8:15 in the evening. Partner meeting, claimed. Wearing new cologne. Dressed more carefully than necessary for meeting with colleagues. She saved the document and opened a new browser window. She searched for private investigators in their city, scrolled through websites advertising discreet surveillance and matrimonial investigations. But she did not call any of them. Not yet. She was not ready for that step, was not ready to admit to a stranger what she barely wanted to admit to herself. Instead, she did something simpler. She logged into their shared cell phone account, something Trevor had insisted on years ago to save money with a family plan. She navigated to the usage details, selected Trevor's number, and began scrolling through his call logs and text message timestamps. The patterns were immediately visible. Multiple calls to the same number, a number she did not recognize, always during his claimed late meetings or on his commute to and from work. Text messages sent and received dozens of times per day, far more than the usual client communications that showed up in his logs. And the duration of the calls was telling. Not the quick 2 or 3 minute exchanges typical of business calls, but long conversations. 20 minutes, 35 minutes. Once, an hour and 7 minutes, at 11:30 at night, while she had been asleep upstairs, and Trevor had supposedly been watching television in the living room. She copied the unknown number into a document, but she did not search for it, did not try to identify who it belonged to. Not yet. She wanted to maintain her composure, wanted to gather all her evidence before allowing herself to fully confront what it meant. But she knew, looking at those call logs, those endless text messages, that this was not a business relationship. This was something else entirely. Trevor came home at midnight, 3.5 hours after he had left for his supposed partner meeting. She pretended to be asleep, lying perfectly still in their bed, while he moved quietly through the dark bedroom, undressing and sliding under the covers beside her. He smelled like his new cologne, stronger than it had been when he left, as if he had reapplied it. And there was another scent underneath, something floral and distinctly feminine, perfume that was not hers. She lay there breathing slowly and evenly, mimicking sleep while her mind raced and her heart hammered against her ribs, and beside her, Trevor fell asleep within minutes, his breathing deep and untroubled, the sleep of someone who believed his secrets were safe. Saturday morning arrived with brilliant sunshine, the kind of clear April day that makes everything look freshly washed and full of promise. Vivian woke before Trevor, slipping out of bed quietly at 6:30 and padding downstairs to make coffee. She stood at the kitchen window, watching the neighbor's cat prowl through the garden, and tried to reconcile the beauty of the morning with the ugliness of what she was discovering. It seemed wrong somehow that the world could look so clean and bright while her marriage was rotting from the inside. Trevor came downstairs at 8, already showered and dressed in clothes that looked deliberately casual. Expensive jeans and a fitted gray Henley shirt that emphasized his shoulders. He smiled at her and said he had forgotten to mention that he needed to go into the office for a few hours. Some documents that required his attention before Monday. She sipped her coffee and asked if this was related to the partner meeting from last night. He hesitated, just for a beat, then said, yes, follow-up work that could not wait. She nodded and asked what time he would be back. He said probably around 2 or 3, depending on how much there was to review. After he left, she sat at the kitchen table with her laptop and began a different kind of research. She searched for Trevor's law firm's website and navigated to the attorney directory, scrolling through the faces and names of partners and associates. She was not sure what she was looking for until she found it. Simone Blackwood, Senior Partner, Corporate Law Division. The photograph showed a woman in her late 30s, striking rather than conventionally beautiful, with sharp cheekbones and sleek dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her eyes were intelligent and assessing, the eyes of someone who knew how to read people and situations. According to her biography, she had graduated from an Ivy League law school, spent 5 years at a prestigious firm in New York before joining this firm 7 years ago, and specialized in mergers and acquisitions. She was described as a mentor to junior attorneys and an advocate for professional development within the firm. Vivian stared at the photograph for a long time, trying to imagine this woman with Trevor, trying to picture them together in restaurants and hotel rooms, sharing intimate conversations and stolen moments. The biography mentioned nothing about Simone's personal life, no mention of family or outside interests, just her professional accomplishments, her cases won, her clients satisfied. Vivian searched for Simone Blackwood on social media, but found nothing. No personal accounts, no photos, no glimpses into her life beyond work. Either she was intensely private, or she kept separate accounts under a different name. On impulse, Vivian searched for Simone Blackwood married and found a brief mention in a local business journal from 6 years ago, a profile piece about successful women in law. The article mentioned that Simone lived with her spouse and their 2 children in an upscale neighborhood across town. Spouse, not husband. The language was carefully neutral. Vivian searched more specifically and found another article, this one older, from a fundraiser for an arts organization. There was a photograph of Simone standing with another woman, both of them in elegant evening wear, identified in the caption as Simone Blackwood and Rochelle Blackwood. The date on the article was 8 years ago, so Simone was married to a woman, and she had 2 children. And according to Trevor's increasingly suspicious behavior, he was also having an affair with Vivian's husband. Vivian closed her laptop and pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to process this information. She did not know why it surprised her. Betrayal was betrayal, regardless of the genders involved, but somehow it made everything feel more complicated, messier, as if there were more people involved in this tragedy than just her and Trevor. She spent the afternoon cleaning the house with an almost manic energy, scrubbing counters that were already clean, reorganizing closets that did not need organizing. She needed to do something physical, something that kept her hands busy and her mind focused on concrete tasks rather than the spiral of hurt and anger that threatened to overwhelm her. She was vacuuming the living room when Trevor came home at 4:30, 2.5 hours later than he had promised. He apologized, said the work had taken longer than expected, asked what she wanted to do for dinner. She suggested they order takeout and watch a movie, something they used to do regularly but had not done in weeks. He agreed, seemed almost relieved to have a normal domestic evening planned. They ate Thai food on the couch and watched a thriller that Vivian could barely follow, her mind only half present, while the rest of her attention was on Trevor. He checked his phone constantly throughout the movie, the screen lighting up his face in the darkened room every few minutes. Each time, he would glance at whatever notification had appeared, a small smile flickering across his features, and then he would type a quick response before tucking the phone back into his pocket. She counted 7 interruptions during the 2-hour film, 7 times when he prioritized his phone over her presence, over their supposed evening together. When the movie ended, she asked if everything was okay with work. He said yes, just some clients who needed reassurance about various things. She did not push further, just nodded, and began collecting the empty takeout containers. As she stood to carry them to the kitchen, his phone buzzed again on the couch cushion. She glanced down and saw the screen light up with a text notification. The contact name was listed simply as S, followed by a red heart emoji. The preview of the message read, "Missing you already. Tonight was perfect." Trevor lunged for the phone with a speed that was almost violent, snatching it up and quickly locking the screen. His face had gone pale, his eyes wide with something that looked like panic. Vivian stood frozen, the takeout containers still in her hands, staring at him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Trevor cleared his throat and said it was a text from a client, someone who was worried about a case. The lie was so transparent, so insultingly obvious, that Vivian almost laughed. Instead, she simply turned and walked to the kitchen, deposited the containers in the trash, and stood at the sink, with her hands gripping the counter edge. He heard Trevor come up behind her, felt him place his hands on her shoulders. He said her name softly, asked if she was okay. She turned to face him and looked directly into his eyes, those familiar brown eyes she had gazed into on their wedding day. when he had promised to love her and honor her and forsake all others. She asked him a simple question, "Are you happy?" He blinked, surprised by the question, and said yes, of course. Why would she ask that? She shrugged and said he had seemed stressed lately, distant, and she wanted to make sure everything was all right. He pulled her into a hug, told her she was overthinking things, that he was just busy with work, but everything was fine with them, with their marriage. She let him hold her, her cheek pressed against his chest, and listened to his heart beating steadily, calmly, as he lied to her face. That night, while Trevor slept beside her, Vivian lay awake and made a decision. She needed help. She needed someone who could provide the kind of information and evidence she could not gather on her own. She needed to know exactly what was happening, the full scope of Trevor's betrayal, before she could decide what to do about it. Because confronting him now, with only her observations and suspicions, would give him room to deny, to gaslight, to make her feel like she was crazy or paranoid. She needed proof, undeniable, concrete proof. Sunday afternoon, while Trevor was supposedly playing golf with colleagues from work, she sat in her car in a parking lot across town and met with a private investigator named Marcus Chen. No, she caught herself, not Chen. She had read the instructions carefully. The investigator's name was Marcus Sullivan, a recommendation she had found through discreet online research. He was in his 50s, gray-haired and professional, with kind eyes that had probably seen too many stories like hers. They sat in his car, away from prying eyes, and she told him everything. The changes in Trevor's behavior, the late meetings, the unexplained expenses, the mark on his neck, the text message from S with a heart emoji. Marcus listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes on a small pad. When she finished, he asked if she knew who the other person was. She said she suspected it was a woman named Simone Blackwood, a senior partner at Trevor's firm. Marcus nodded and said he would start surveillance immediately, documenting Trevor's movements and activities. He explained his rates, his methods, his commitment to discretion. He told her that in his experience, if she was noticing these signs, she was almost certainly right. Spouses always know, he said. They might not want to believe it, might try to explain it away, but deep down, they always know. She hired him on the spot, paid his retainer with a check from her personal account, the one Trevor never looked at, because she managed all their finances. Marcus said he would have preliminary findings within a week, possibly sooner if Trevor maintained his current pattern of frequent meetings with his suspected affair partner. They shook hands, and she drove home feeling strangely calm, as if taking action had released some of the pressure that had been building inside her chest for weeks. Over the next several days, she fell into a strange routine of normalcy on the surface and careful observation underneath. She taught her classes, graded papers, had coffee with colleagues who commented that she seemed tired and asked if everything was okay. She smiled and said she was fine, just busy with end-of-semester preparations. She came home each evening and made dinner, asked Trevor about his day, listened to his increasingly elaborate stories about difficult clients and demanding partners. She nodded in all the right places, made appropriate comments, played the role of the supportive wife, while mentally cataloging every inconsistency, every suspicious detail. On Tuesday, Trevor came home with flowers. A dozen red roses, expensive and dramatic, presented to her with a sheepish smile. He said he knew he had been working too much lately and wanted to remind her that he appreciated her patience and understanding. She took the flowers, thanked him, found a vase, and arranged them on the kitchen counter. They were beautiful, the petals perfect and velvety, and she hated them because she knew with absolute certainty that they were not really for her. They were guilt flowers, conscience flowers, an attempt to assuage his own discomfort about his lies rather than a genuine gesture of affection. Wednesday afternoon, Marcus called her during her office hours. He said he had some preliminary information, and could they meet that evening? She agreed, told Trevor she had a faculty meeting, and drove to a coffee shop on the edge of town, where she was unlikely to run into anyone she knew. Marcus was already there, sitting in a corner booth with a manila folder in front of him. She slid into the seat across from him, her hands shaking slightly as she wrapped them around a cup of tea she had no intention of drinking. He opened the folder and began laying out photographs. Trevor and Simone leaving the office building together, her hand on his arm, both of them laughing. Trevor and Simone getting into his car in the parking garage, his hand on the small of her back. Trevor and Simone entering a boutique hotel downtown, the kind of place that catered to business travelers and valued discretion. The timestamps showed these visits happening during his claimed late meetings, his supposed partner sessions, his alleged client emergencies, 3 times in the past week alone. Monday evening, 6:45 to 9:30. Wednesday afternoon, 2:15 to 4. Friday evening, 8 to 11:45. Marcus slid another set of photographs across the table. Trevor and Simone at a restaurant, the same Italian place where the $283 receipt had come from. They were seated at a small table in the back, holding hands across the white tablecloth, looking at each other with an intimacy that made Vivian's stomach turn. In one photo, Simone was laughing at something Trevor had said, her head thrown back, her whole face alight with joy. In another, Trevor was leaning across the table to kiss her, his hand cupping her face with a tenderness that Vivian recognized because it used to be directed at her. She stared at the photographs for a long time, not speaking, barely breathing. This was what she had asked for, what she had needed. Proof, evidence, confirmation. But seeing it laid out before her, these glossy images of her husband's betrayal, was somehow worse than she had imagined. Marcus explained that he had traced the affair back using credit card records and phone data. Based on the patterns, he estimated it had been going on for approximately 4 months, starting shortly after Trevor's return from the Chicago conference in mid-March. That conference where, Marcus had discovered, Simone had also been present, speaking on a panel about corporate litigation strategies. 4 months, 1/3 of a year, 16 weeks of lies and deception and carefully constructed alibis. Vivian felt something crack inside her, some fundamental piece of herself that she had been holding together through sheer will. She asked Marcus, her voice barely above a whisper, if there was more. He nodded and showed her additional surveillance notes. Times and dates, locations, patterns of behavior. Trevor and Simone met an average of 3 to 4 times per week, usually in the evening but occasionally during afternoon hours when Trevor claimed to be in depositions or client meetings. They varied their locations, sometimes the boutique hotel, sometimes restaurants in different parts of the city, once a wine bar, twice a park where they sat in his car for over an hour. She asked about Simone's wife, Rochelle. Did Marcus know if she was aware of the affair? He said he had not been hired to investigate Rochelle, but based on Simone's continued residence at the family home and normal routine of dropping children at school and attending their activities, it seemed likely that Rochelle did not know, or, like Vivian until recently, was choosing not to see what was right in front of her. Vivian collected all the photographs and documents, placed them carefully back in the folder, and thanked Marcus for his work. He asked if she wanted him to continue surveillance, to gather additional evidence. She said yes, keep documenting everything, because she was going to need as much ammunition as possible for what came next. She paid him for the work completed and drove home slowly, the folder sitting on the passenger seat like a bomb waiting to detonate. That night, Vivian sat in her home office with the door closed, the folder of photographs spread across her desk like evidence at a crime scene. She had told Trevor she needed to finish grading a stack of essays, and he had accepted this explanation without question. Kissing her forehead and saying he would be downstairs watching television if she needed anything. The casual ease of his lie, the comfortable domesticity of his deception, made her want to scream. Instead, she locked the door, turned on her desk lamp, and began to study the evidence of her husband's affair with the same methodical attention she brought to analyzing a complex literary text. She organized the photographs chronologically, creating a timeline that matched the spreadsheet she had been maintaining. The first image Marcus had captured was from March 18th, just 3 days after Trevor's return from Chicago. Trevor and Simone leaving the office together, walking close but not touching, both of them carrying briefcases as if this were a perfectly normal professional interaction. But even in this early photograph, Vivian could see something in their body language, an awareness of each other, a magnetic pull that spoke of intimacy beyond collegial friendship. The progression was visible across the subsequent images. By late March, they were touching frequently, his hand on her back, her fingers on his arm. By early April, they were holding hands in restaurants, kissing in parking garages, entering hotel rooms with an urgency that was painfully obvious. The most recent photographs, from just 2 days ago, showed them sitting in his car in a secluded corner of a park, her head on his shoulder, his arms wrapped around her, both of them looking peaceful and content in a way that twisted something sharp and painful in Vivian's chest. She picked up one particular photograph and held it under the lamp, studying every detail. It was from the Italian restaurant, the one with the $283 receipt. Trevor was looking at Simone with an expression Vivian recognized, the same look he had given her when they were dating, when everything was new and exciting and full of possibility. It was the look of someone falling in love, or believing they were falling in love, or at least falling into something intoxicating enough to risk everything else. Simone was laughing, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes bright with amusement. They looked happy, genuinely, authentically happy. And that, Vivian realized, was what hurt the most. Not just that Trevor was cheating, but that he appeared to be finding real joy in it, real connection, something he apparently was not finding with her anymore. She set the photograph down and opened her laptop, pulling up the document where she had been tracking everything. She added the new information from Marcus, creating a comprehensive record of the affair. 4 months. Approximately 48 meetings, based on Trevor's claimed late nights and Marcus's surveillance. Thousands of dollars spent on hotels, restaurants, gifts. 4 months of looking her in the eye and lying. 4 months of sleeping beside her at night and thinking about someone else. 4 months of destroying their marriage while pretending everything was fine. A knock on the door made her jump. Trevor's voice came through, asking if she wanted some tea. She quickly closed the laptop and gathered the photographs back into the folder, tucking it into her desk drawer. She took a breath, composed her face, and opened the door. He stood there with 2 mugs of Earl Grey, the same evening ritual they had shared for years, smiling at her with apparent affection. She took the mug, thanked him, and he asked how the grading was going. She said slowly, "Lots of work to do." He nodded sympathetically and said he would let her get back to it, but to come down when she was done so they could spend some time together. After he left, she stood holding the tea, feeling the warmth of the mug against her palms, and marveled at his ability to compartmentalize. How could he bring her tea with the same hands that had touched another woman hours ago? How could he suggest spending time together while his phone was undoubtedly full of messages from his lover? The cognitive dissonance required to maintain this double life seemed exhausting, yet Trevor appeared to manage it with ease. She poured the tea down the bathroom sink, returned to her desk, and made a decision. She needed to know more about the other woman in this triangle, the other betrayed spouse. Rochelle Blackwood deserved to know what was happening in her marriage, just as Vivian now knew what was happening in hers. But more than that, Vivian needed an ally, someone who understood the specific pain of this situation, someone who could help her navigate what came next. Finding Rochelle proved surprisingly easy. A search of social media revealed an active account under the name Rochelle Blackwood, with privacy settings loose enough to show her profile picture and basic information. The photograph showed a woman in her mid-40s, attractive in a warm, approachable way, with shoulder-length auburn hair and laugh lines around her eyes. Her profile indicated she worked as a freelance graphic designer and listed her location as the same upscale neighborhood Vivian had read about in the Business Journal article. More importantly, her account showed regular posts about her 2 teenage children, updates about school events and sports games, photos of family dinners and weekend hikes, the portrait of a normal, stable family life, a life that was probably as much of a fiction as Vivian's own. Vivian created a new email account under a neutral name, taking time to make it appear legitimate and professional rather than suspicious. She drafted a message carefully, revising it multiple times before she was satisfied. The tone needed to be direct but compassionate, honest but not cruel. She explained who she was, what she had discovered about their respective spouses, and suggested they meet to discuss the situation. She included her phone number and offered to meet anywhere Rochelle felt comfortable. Then, before she could second-guess herself, she sent the email and closed her laptop. The response came faster than she expected. 3 hours later, just after midnight, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Rochelle. I got your email. Can we meet tomorrow? I've been waiting for someone to contact me. I already know." The message was followed by an address, a coffee shop in a neighborhood between their 2 homes, and a time, 2 in the afternoon. Vivian stared at the message for a long time, processing those last 3 words. I already know. How long had Rochelle known? Days? Weeks? Months? And if she knew, why had she not acted? But even as she asked herself these questions, she understood the answer. Because knowing and acknowledging are 2 different things. Because sometimes you need someone else to confirm what you have been desperately hoping is not true. Because facing betrayal alone is terrifying, but facing it with an ally makes it slightly less impossible. She texted back a simple confirmation, then lay awake for the rest of the night, listening to Trevor's peaceful breathing beside her, and wondering how many more nights she would have to endure this pretense before everything finally exploded. Thursday morning arrived with gray skies and a light drizzle that matched Vivian's mood. She taught her morning class on autopilot, discussing Macbeth's descent into guilt and paranoia with students who had no idea their professor was living through her own tragedy. One student asked about Lady Macbeth's famous line, "Out, damned spot," wondering why guilt manifests as a visible stain in the play. Vivian explained that Shakespeare understood how betrayal and deceit leave marks on the soul, invisible to others, but unbearable to the one carrying them. The student nodded thoughtfully and wrote this down, and Vivian felt a hysterical laugh building in her throat that she had to force down. At 1:30, she left campus and drove to the coffee shop, arriving 15 minutes early. She ordered green tea she did not want and sat at a corner table where she could see the door. At exactly 2 o'clock, a woman matching Rochelle's profile picture walked in, scanning the room with obvious anxiety. Vivian raised her hand slightly, and Rochelle's eyes locked onto hers with immediate recognition. Not of Vivian specifically, but of the situation, the shared experience of being the betrayed wife waiting in a coffee shop to discuss her husband's infidelity. Rochelle ordered something at the counter, then walked over and slid into the chair across from Vivian. Up close, she looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes that makeup could not quite hide. She was dressed professionally but casually, jeans and a soft sweater, her auburn hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She set her coffee down and spoke without preamble, her voice low and controlled. "How long have you known?" Vivian appreciated the directness. "I confirmed it 3 weeks ago, but I started noticing things about a month before that, since mid-March. What about you?" Rochelle's laugh was bitter, humorless. I've known for 4 months. I found messages on Simone's laptop in early March, right after she got back from that conference in Chicago. Explicit messages about how they couldn't wait to see each other again, how the conference had been the best week of their lives. I confronted her immediately. What did she say? She cried, apologized, swore it was just an emotional connection, that nothing physical had happened, that she would end it immediately. She said your husband had pursued her, that she had been vulnerable and made a mistake, but it meant nothing. Rochelle's voice was flat, reciting facts without emotion. She begged me not to leave her, said she couldn't lose me and the kids. I wanted to believe her. 23 years of marriage, 2 children, a whole life built together. I wanted so desperately to believe her. Deep, but she didn't end it. No, she just got better at hiding it, changed her passwords, deleted messages more frequently, claimed she needed to work late more often. I hired a private investigator 6 weeks ago. I have proof of at least 30 meetings between Simone and your husband since that conference. Hotels, restaurants, even her car in parking lots. The investigator estimates the affair has been ongoing consistently for the entire 4 months. Vivian pulled out her own folder and slid several photographs across the table. Rochelle looked at them without flinching, as if she had already seen enough evidence to be immune to further pain. When she reached the image of Trevor and Simone kissing at the Italian restaurant, she pushed it back across the table and took a slow breath. I filed for divorce yesterday, Rochelle said quietly. My lawyer has everything. All the photographs, all the evidence, all the financial records showing money spent on this affair. In our state, adultery affects the settlement, especially when marital funds are used for extramarital relationships. But there's something else you should know. She pulled out her phone, opened a document, and turned the screen toward Vivian. Simone's firm has a strict code of conduct prohibiting romantic relationships between partners and associates, especially when there's a supervisory relationship involved. Your husband works directly under Simone in the corporate division. She's his mentor, his supervisor, the person responsible for his performance reviews and advancement opportunities. This isn't just an affair. It's a violation of professional ethics that could cost both of them their careers. Vivian stared at the document, a copy of the firm's ethics policy, highlighted sections making it clear that such relationships were grounds for disciplinary action up to and including termination. What are you planning to do with this? My lawyer sent a complete dossier to the firm's executive committee this morning. It includes the ethics violations, the evidence of the affair, and documentation of how firm resources were used to facilitate it. Meetings scheduled as client consultations that were actually hotel visits. Expense reports claiming dinner meetings that were romantic dates. The committee meets this afternoon at 3 to review it. Vivian checked her watch. It was 2:45. In 15 minutes, Simone Blackwood's professional world was about to collapse, and Trevor, tied to her through the affair and the ethics violations, would be caught in the same explosion. She looked at Rochelle, seeing in her face a mirror of her own pain, but also something else. Resolve, determination, the strength that comes from deciding you will not be a victim, but a survivor. Why are you telling me this? Vivian asked. Because you deserve to know what's coming, and because I've learned that the only way to survive something like this is to take control of the narrative before they do. In a few hours, your husband is going to come home in a panic. Simone will probably be suspended or fired. Trevor will face professional consequences as well, possibly termination or, at minimum, a formal reprimand. Their affair will be exposed to everyone at the firm, everyone in their professional circles. The fantasy they've been living in will shatter against reality. Rochelle leaned forward, her eyes intense. When Trevor comes home tonight, he's going to want to confess, to control how you find out, to frame it in whatever way makes him look least culpable. Don't let him. You have power right now that you'll never have again. Use it. They talked for another hour. sharing details of their respective investigations, comparing notes on lies and inconsistencies, offering each other the validation that comes from knowing you are not crazy, you are not paranoid, you were right all along. Rochelle showed Vivian her lawyer's contact information, recommended the private investigator she had used, shared strategies for protecting assets, and documenting everything. It was a crash course in preparing for divorce, delivered by someone who had already walked the path Vivian was just beginning. When they finally stood to leave, Rochelle hugged her. A brief but genuine embrace. "I'm sorry you're going through this," she said, "but you're stronger than you think, and you're not alone." Vivian drove home slowly, her mind spinning with everything Rochelle had told her. She had 3 hours before Trevor would typically arrive home from work. 3 hours to prepare for the confrontation she knew was coming. 3 hours to transform from the unsuspecting wife he thought she was into the informed adversary he had created. She spent those hours methodically. She called the lawyer Rochelle had recommended and scheduled an emergency consultation for the following morning. She gathered financial documents, made copies of credit card statements and bank records, organized everything into clearly labeled folders. She took photographs of the house, their possessions, documentation of their life together, in case she needed evidence later. She moved her most valuable personal items, things with sentimental value, into her car trunk for safekeeping. She changed her own passwords on every account, secured her personal information, opened a separate bank account in only her name. By the time she heard Trevor's car in the driveway at 6:15, earlier than expected, she was ready. She was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, her hands steady, her mind clear. She heard the garage door open, then close, heard his footsteps, faster than usual, almost running, heard him drop his briefcase with a thud rather than setting it down carefully. And when he appeared in the doorway, she saw immediately that everything Rochelle had predicted had come to pass. Trevor's face was pale, his eyes wide with something approaching panic. His shirt was rumpled, his tie loosened and askew. His hands were shaking. He stood in the doorway staring at her, and she could see him trying to formulate words, trying to figure out how to tell her, how to frame it, how to control the situation. She spoke before he could, her voice calm and level. "You look upset. Did something happen at work?" He swallowed hard, ran a hand through his hair. "Vivian, we need to talk. Something happened today. Something I need to explain." "All right." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit down. Tell me what happened." He sat heavily, as if his legs could no longer support him. "There was an emergency partner meeting this afternoon. Someone filed a complaint about me and another attorney at the firm, about an inappropriate relationship." "What kind of inappropriate relationship?" She kept her voice neutral, curious, as if she were asking about the plot of a television show rather than the destruction of her marriage. "With Simone Blackwood, one of the senior partners. Someone claimed we were having an affair." "Are you?" The question hung in the air between them, simple and devastating. Trevor's mouth opened and closed, no sound emerging. She watched him struggle. This man she had shared 10 years of her life with, this man she had trusted completely, and felt something inside her harden into steel. He was still trying to calculate, still trying to figure out what she knew and how much he could deny. Even now, caught and cornered, he was looking for an exit, an angle, a way to minimize the damage. "I asked you a question," she said, her voice still calm, still controlled. "Are you having an affair with Simone Blackwood?" "Vivian, He started, then stopped. His hands were gripping the edge of the table now, knuckles white. "I made a terrible mistake. It wasn't supposed to happen. It just—" "How long?" She cut through his attempt at explanation, not interested in his justifications or his narrative of how things just happened, as if he had been a passive participant in his own choices. "It started in Chicago, at the conference. We were working late one night, and we just connected in a way I didn't expect. It was supposed to be one time, just a moment of weakness, But then, 4 months, she interrupted again. It's been 4 months, Trevor. Not a moment, not a mistake. 4 months of deliberate, calculated choices. 4 months of lies. His face crumpled. How did you know? Does it matter? She took a sip of her tea, letting him sit with his question unanswered. Tell me what happened today at the meeting. He ran both hands through his hair, a gesture of distress she recognized. Someone sent the executive committee evidence of the relationship. Photographs, financial records, everything. They suspended Simone immediately pending a full investigation. They're reviewing my position as well. There could be ethics violations because she's my supervisor. I could lose my job, Vivian. I could be disbarred. You're worried about your job. It was not a question, just an observation of his priorities even in this moment. No, I mean, yes, but that's not... He reached across the table toward her hand, but she pulled it away before he could touch her. Vivian, please, I know I've hurt you. I know I've betrayed your trust, but I want to fix this. I want to make it right. It's over with Simone. Completely over. It was never real anyway. You're my wife. You're the one I love. I just got confused for a while. She almost laughed at the absurdity of it. 4 months was not confusion. 4 months was a choice, repeated daily. When did you decide it was over? When the executive committee called you into the meeting? Or just now, when you realized you might face real consequences? That's not fair. I've been feeling guilty for weeks. I wanted to end it. I just didn't know how. You're lying? She said it without heat, just stating a fact. You texted her last night. I saw the message. Missing you already. Tonight was perfect. Those aren't the words of someone trying to end an affair. His face went even paler. You saw that? I've seen a lot of things, Trevor. I've known about the affair for 3 weeks. I've watched you lie to me every single day. I've documented everything. The late meetings that weren't meetings. The restaurants you claimed were business dinners. The hotel you've been visiting 3 to 4 times a week. I know about the $412 you spent on new clothes at that boutique downtown. I know about the cologne you bought to impress her. I know about the 87 text messages you exchanged with her on Tuesday alone. I know everything. He stared at her as if she had transformed into someone he did not recognize. You've been watching me? I've been paying attention. There's a difference. You assumed I was blind or stupid or too trusting to notice. But I noticed everything, Trevor. Every lie, every inconsistency, every moment when you chose her over me and thought I didn't see. Why didn't you say anything? His voice had dropped to almost a whisper. Why did you just watch? Because I needed to understand the full scope of what you'd done. Because I needed evidence, not just suspicions. Because I needed to be certain before I destroyed our marriage. She paused, met his eyes directly. And because I wanted to see if you would ever tell me the truth on your own. You didn't. You would have kept lying indefinitely if you hadn't been caught. He buried his face in his hands. What do you want me to say? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It was wrong. I was selfish and stupid, and I hate myself for hurting you. I don't want your apology, she said quietly. Apologies are for small things. For forgetting an anniversary or saying something thoughtless. You don't apologize for 4 months of systematic betrayal. You don't apologize for looking me in the eye every day and lying. You don't apologize for making me feel crazy when I question things, for gaslighting me into doubting my own instincts. Then, what do you want? She reached down beside her chair and pulled up a manila envelope, placed it on the table between them. I want you to sign these. My lawyer drew them up today. Divorce papers. I'm filing on grounds of adultery, which affects asset division in our state. Given your use of marital funds for the affair and the documented evidence of your infidelity, I'll receive 60% of our shared assets. You have until Friday to move out. That's 2 days. Trevor grabbed the envelope, pulled out the papers, stared at them as if they were written in a foreign language. You can't be serious. You're not even going to give us a chance to work through this? Work through what? Exactly. Your affair? Your lies? The fact that you spent 4 months building a relationship with someone else while pretending everything was fine with me? What exactly do you think we'd be working through? Marriage counseling? Therapy? I could quit my job. We could move somewhere new. Start fresh. I don't want to start fresh with you, Trevor. I want to start fresh without you. You killed this marriage. Not in a moment of weakness, but in hundreds of small choices over 4 months. Every time you texted her instead of talking to me, every time you spent money on her instead of us, every time you showered to wash away her perfume before coming to bed beside me, you killed us slowly and deliberately, and I watched you do it. Please. His voice broke, and tears started sliding down his face. Please, Vivian. I know I don't deserve it, but please give me another chance. I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy. I'll change jobs. I'll never speak to her again. Just please don't leave me. She looked at him crying and felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, not even pity. Just a vast emptiness where her love for him used to live. I met Rochelle yesterday, Simone's wife. Did you know she's known about the affair for 4 months? Since it started? She confronted Simone immediately, and Simone promised to end it. She cried and apologized and begged for forgiveness, just like you're doing now. And then she went right back to seeing you, lying more carefully, hiding it better. That's what a second chance gets you. More lies, just better concealed. Trevor's face went through several expressions, shock and fear, and something that looked like calculation. Rochelle is the one who sent the information to the executive committee. Yes, she filed for divorce yesterday. Her lawyer made sure the firm knew about all the ethics violations, all the misuse of company resources, all the lies you and Simone told to facilitate your affair. She destroyed Simone's career as payment for destroying their marriage. And she was right to do it. You helped her. It was an accusation, thick with betrayal, as if he had any right to feel betrayed by her actions. I met with her once, but she'd already made her decisions before I ever contacted her. She just wanted to warn me about what was coming, to give me time to prepare. She was kind enough to think about my well-being, which is more than you've done in months. Trevor stood abruptly, began pacing the kitchen. This is insane. You're destroying everything. My career, our marriage, our life together. Over one mistake. 4 months is not one mistake. It's a pattern, a choice, a whole separate relationship. And I'm not destroying anything, Trevor. You did that. I'm just refusing to pretend I don't see the rubble you left behind. He stopped pacing, leaned against the counter with his back to her. When he spoke again, his voice was different, harder. Fine. You want a divorce? You'll get one. But you're not getting 60% of everything we built together. I'll fight you on this. You can try, she said calmly, but I have documentation of every dollar you spent on your affair. Hotel rooms, restaurants, gifts, clothes, all from our joint account. Approximately $8,000 over 4 months. My lawyer is confident any judge will see that as dissipation of marital assets. Plus, adultery is a factor in our state. You have very little ground to stand on. He turned back to face her, and she saw anger now, defensive and ugly. You've been planning this. All this time you knew. You were just setting me up, gathering ammunition like I'm some kind of enemy. You made yourself my enemy when you chose to betray me. I'm just making sure I don't end up destroyed by your choices. I'm protecting myself, which is something I should have done earlier, but foolishly didn't, because I trusted you. So that's it? 10 years of marriage means nothing? It meant something, she said softly. It meant everything to me. But you're the one who decided it meant nothing. Every time you met her, you chose to value 4 hours with her more than 10 years with me. You made that calculation repeatedly. Don't act surprised that I'm finally accepting your assessment. He grabbed his keys from the counter. I can't do this right now. I need to think. I need to figure out what to do about work. About work, she repeated. Not about us. Not about what you've destroyed. About work. That's not what I meant. Yes, it is. Even now, you're more concerned about your career than about what you've done to me. That tells me everything I need to know about where your priorities are. He stood at the doorway, looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. Resentment, maybe, or regret, or just exhaustion at finally being caught. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem to solve. You have 2 days to figure it out and move your things. After that, I'm having the locks changed. This is my house too. This was our house. Now it's the house you chose to leave every time you went to be with her. You made it very clear this place didn't matter to you. She stood, carried her teacup to the sink. The guest room is available tonight if you need it, but I want you gone by Friday evening. He left without another word, and she heard him climb the stairs, heard the guest room door close. She stood at the sink, hands braced on the counter, and took several deep breaths. She had done it. She had confronted him, maintained control, refused to be manipulated by his tears or his anger, and she had survived. The next few days passed in a blur of legal consultations and practical arrangements. Trevor moved between the guest room and the couch, trying at various points to engage her in conversation, to plead his case, to negotiate. She remained polite but distant, treating him like a roommate she barely knew. On Thursday morning, he left for what he said was a meeting with the firm's disciplinary committee. He returned 3 hours later, pale and shaken, and told her he had been placed on indefinite unpaid leave pending the completion of their ethics investigation. Simone had been terminated, effective immediately. She's destroyed, he said, sitting at the kitchen table where Vivian was working on her laptop. 20 years of building her career. Gone because of me. Gone because of her choices, Vivian corrected, without looking up from her screen. She's the one who violated professional ethics. She's the one who chose to have an affair with a subordinate. Those were her decisions. You don't understand. She's lost everything. Her job, her marriage, probably her reputation in the whole legal community. Rochelle's taking the kids. Simone has nothing left. Vivian finally looked at him, really looked at him, and saw what she had suspected. Even now, even after everything, he was worried about Simone, concerned for her well-being, still emotionally invested in the woman who had helped him destroy his marriage. You still care about her? No, He stopped, seemed to realize there was no good way to finish that sentence. It's complicated. It's really not. You cared about her enough to risk everything for her. And now that the risk became reality, you're learning that what you had with her wasn't worth what you lost with me. But that's your problem to live with, not mine. Friday afternoon, a moving truck arrived. Trevor had arranged to put his belongings in storage while he figured out his next steps. He was staying with a friend from law school, someone who lived across town, and apparently asked fewer questions than Trevor deserved. Vivian watched from the living room window as men carried boxes and furniture down the stairs, loading piece by piece the physical remnants of their shared life. Trevor's law books, his desk, his clothes, the television from the den, the coffee maker he had insisted on buying because it made better espresso than their old one. When the truck was finally loaded, Trevor came back inside one last time. He stood in the doorway of the living room, looking around as if memorizing the space. I know you won't believe this, he said quietly, but I did love you. I do love you. I just made horrible choices. Love is a verb, Trevor. It's something you do, not something you feel. And your actions for the past 4 months showed me exactly how much you loved me. He nodded slowly, accepting this. If I could go back and change it all, I would. I know that doesn't help, but I need you to know that. You can't go back. None of us can. We can only move forward from here. She walked to the front door, opened it. Goodbye, Trevor. He left, and she closed the door behind him, locked it, and leaned against it for a long moment. Then she walked through the house, room by room, noting the empty spaces where his things had been, the gaps on the bookshelves, the blank spot on the wall where his diplomas had hung, the missing chair from the kitchen table. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, as if his absence had removed weight she had not realized she was carrying. 3 months later, Vivian stood in front of her mirror in her new apartment, a smaller place across town that was entirely hers. The divorce had been finalized the previous week, faster than she had expected because Trevor had ultimately signed everything without fighting. He had accepted the 60-40 split, taken his belongings, and moved to a different city for a new job at a smaller firm willing to overlook the ethics violation. They had not spoken since the day he moved out, all communication handled through their respective lawyers. She adjusted her earrings, simple silver drops that caught the light, and checked her reflection one final time. She was meeting a colleague from the university for dinner, a professor from the history department named James, who had recently asked her out for coffee after a faculty meeting. She had said yes, surprising herself, not because she was looking for a relationship, but because she was finally ready to consider the possibility of one. Not to replace Trevor, not to fill a void, but simply because she was learning to be open to life again. The dinner was pleasant, easy conversation about books and teaching and the small absurdities of academic life. James was kind and funny and clearly interested, but respectful of boundaries, not pushing for more than she was ready to give. When he walked her to her car afterward, he asked if she would like to do it again sometime. She said yes, she would, and she meant it. Driving home through the quiet streets, Vivian thought about how much had changed in 3 months. She had survived the worst kind of betrayal and emerged on the other side, not unchanged, but not destroyed either. She had learned that she was stronger than she had known, more resilient, more capable of protecting herself when necessary. She had learned that love without trust is just a comfortable lie, and she would never settle for that again. The apartment was dark when she arrived home, just a small lamp left on in the living room, warm and welcoming in its simplicity. She made herself tea, carried it to the couch, and sat in the quiet. She thought about Trevor sometimes, wondered if he was happy, or if he had realized yet what he had lost. But mostly, she thought about her own life, about the future she was building, about the person she was becoming. Her phone buzzed with a text. It was from Rochelle, who had become an unexpected friend through their shared experience. "How was the dinner date?" it asked. Vivian smiled and typed back. "Nice, really nice. Having coffee next week." "Good for you," came the response. "You deserve happiness." She set the phone down and sipped her tea, letting the warmth spread through her. Did she deserve happiness? Maybe, probably. But more importantly, she was choosing it, actively building it, refusing to let Trevor's betrayal define the rest of her life. She was teaching her students about tragedy and redemption, about characters who fall and characters who rise, and she was learning, slowly but surely, to write her own story of rising. The scar would always be there, she knew. Some hurts leave permanent marks, but scars are just proof that you survived something painful, that you healed, that you kept going. She touched her ring finger, where her wedding band used to sit, the pale line already starting to fade. In time, that too would disappear, and there would be no physical evidence of what she had lost. But she would remember. She would remember what it felt like to trust completely, and have that trust destroyed. She would remember what it cost her to reclaim her life, and she would remember that she had done it, had survived, had chosen herself when it mattered most. Outside, the city lights twinkled in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Trevor was probably lying awake, wrestling with his own regrets. Somewhere out there, Simone was rebuilding a life from the rubble of her choices. But here, in this small apartment that smelled like tea and new beginnings, Vivian was learning to sleep peacefully again, learning to trust herself, learning that the best revenge is not destruction, but reconstruction, not bitterness, but blooming. She finished her tea, washed the mug, and prepared for bed. Tomorrow, she would teach her students about King Lear, about how the play begins with blindness and ends with terrible sight, about how wisdom often comes too late. But tonight, she would simply sleep, dreamless and quiet, in a space that was entirely her own. And that, she thought as she turned off the lights, was enough. More than enough. It was everything. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.